I've never had much of an urge to collect Chaos Space Marines. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're kind of just Space Marines. And I like Space Marines, I like Space Marines a lot. I have like a 16,000 point army of Black Templars. And that Black Templars army satisfies my itch of wanting to play as the baddies, because Black Templars, not the most squeaky clean of heroes. Space Marines make a lot of sense to me because their aesthetic is consistent. You got these big bulky space dudes and all of their vehicles are brick shaped. It is very coherent. The Chaos Space Marines, on the other hand, are, I guess, chaotic. You got your regular old space dudes, but then you got dino bots and you got spider riders and they're led by sorcerers with dragon wings. It's a little bit all over the place, and that inconsistency has kind of kept me away from Chaos Space Marines. But now that I've painted every single Space Marine unit, or actually several of every Space Marine unit, I've been thinking about the bad guys, the Chaos Space Marines. I think they actually require a completely different style of painting to make them work. These are my last attempt for Chaos Space Marines, my Night Lords Legionaries kill team, and they're fine. I painted them like I would normal Space Marines. The armor got all blue, all of the trim got gold, red accents on their masks and crotch banners, green grenades, neon green plasma. It's just too much color, used in an uninteresting way. My favorite part of this team is the Proxy Sorcerer model I made using a Carnival Vampire mini. I remember this team being not much fun to paint. It took 3 times as long as it takes to paint a regular Marine, and in the end, I haven't painted another Chaos Space Marine in 2 years. Cracking open a box of Chaos Space Marines doesn't feel much different from opening a box of Intercessor Space Marines. Flipping through the instructions, a lot of parts are a mirror of their Loyalist counterpart, just with more trim. So much more trim. These guys are a lot more dynamically posed than the regular Space Marines, with more unique weapons, like this guy with a belt-fed bolt gun. I drilled out the barrel, and the instructions have 2 hands on this gun, but I want him holding it one-handed. So I nipped off the handguard, cleaned it up a little bit, and then added my own handguard using some scrap plastic card. It might look a little rough, but I bet after it's painted no one will even notice. I glued it on, attaching the rest of the belt to his hip, and now it's onto the other hand. I found this little knife. It feels very Chaos Space Marines to whip out the little knife instead of using his bolt gun with chain-fed ammo. Now all that's left is to pick out a suitably horny helmet. And for his shoulder pads, the Chaos Space Marine shoulders are a little much. I want to do some storytelling, so I went with my Space Marine sprues and grabbed a classic part number 69 shoulder pad, and 1 bedazzled Chaos Space Marine shoulder pad. I made up a little green stuff and stuck a small ball into his shoulder to bulk him up just a little bit. Then I grabbed a Chaos backpack, which for some reason always has the power plant exhaust balls really far away from the reactor. I always wondered if this detail is aesthetic or practical. I found a backpack that has a dead Space Marine head stabbed on top. This will be important for an idea I have later. I now feel the pain of Chaos Space Marine players, because I feel like this box has 2 major flaws. Number 1, the Chaos Space Marines it makes are too small, and that's really unfortunate. This kit came out in 2019, so it's not that old, but they came out right before the Great Embiggening. Games Workshop models have always been in a 28mm heroic scale, so they're all kind of about the same height, but Games Workshop switched to like a proper 28mm scale where things that are big are big. It's like Space Marines are big, Orcs are medium, and Guard are human-sized. I went back to my old tricks of bulking out Space Marines. I used to do this on all of my old Tactical Marines where you put a little green stuff on their shoulders to kind of biggin them up, and you do a little bit in their waist too. But they're a little small, and there's not a ton of opportunities for kit bash and conversion. Space Marines are really lucky because Space Marines are kind of boring. But what that means is all infantry Space Marine kits fit within all other Space Marine infantry kits, so you can do a lot of mixing and matching as you get more kits. But Chaos Space Marines, with the possible exception of Warp Talons, you're kind of stuck with just this box. And to be fair to this box, it lets you build all guys with bolters and all guys with chainswords, so you can get 20 unique guys out of this box, but after that, things get a little dicey. But speaking of dicey, I'm pretty happy with the little bit of modeling I was able to do on this guy, and now it is time to give him a base. Here is where I think I can fix the height issue. I grabbed a snazzy Cobalt Keep magnet base and got to work adding some height. I took some 1/4-inch cork and glued it down to the base, filling up most of the space, and then tore off some chunks, making little triangles of cork. I glued these down on an angle, sticking up in the air, and then locked them in place with plenty of super glue and baking soda. I used some 1/8-inch cork to add some more height and blend in the spikes with the flat parts, and then I used my fingertips and point of my hobby knife to chisel away the cork to shape it. Now I can add on a little sand. I sprinkled it on, letting gravity decide where the sand should pile up, and then soaked it with ultra-thin super glue to seal it in place. I glued down my Chaos Space Marine, and now he's exactly the same height, even a little bit taller than a Primaris Space Marine if you include his backpack spike. I like my little Legionnaire, and I'm very impressed by the number of horns Games Workshop is able to get on this little tiny fella. The sheer horniness of Chaos Space Marines is impressive. And you might have noticed he is magnetized onto a lovely tall painting handle from today's sponsor, Cobalt Keep. Cobalt Keep makes the highest quality magnet-ready wargaming bases west of the Rockies, and those magnetic bases aren't just great for transport, they also work perfectly with Cobalt Keep painting hilts. These are rugged, comfy handles that come in multiple sizes. The painting hilt, a cute little handle for little models, or if you have chunkier models or chunkier hands, the painting hilt XL might be for you. And coming soon, a brand new tall size, with all the same features like the rugged plastic construction, metal plate for holding a magnetized base firmly in place, and a slot for attaching a stand so that there's no danger of tipping these handles over. For my Chaos Space Marine, I'm using the upcoming tall size, and I have to say, I'm a fan. The Cobalt Keep painting handles are simple and effective, and if features are what you're looking for, the Painting Hilt Pro might be for you. The Pro handle is larger and features rotating caps so you can spin your model, and attachment points for an LED light with 3 brightness settings and a magnifying glass for getting a really close look at your minis. If you're looking for the perfect system to hold your model safely and securely, there's nothing better than Cobalt Keep painting hilts. Shop with the code EOB20 to get 20% off your order of Cobalt Keep painting hilts. So the thing I've experienced painting Chaos Space Marines is they're boring, because I kind of paint them like normal Space Marines, where everything gets a color, but there's just a lot more things to get color. But when I look at the Codex art for Codex Chaos Space Marines, and that big guy on the front looks so wickedly cool, I want to see if there's a way to get that kind of abstract, chaotic energy onto an actual miniature and make it fun to paint. I primed my Chaos Space Marine in black and my fingers were itching to grab my white ink to zenithal this guy, but I want to experiment. So maybe something a little closer to Slapchop will get me what I'm after. I put a warm white and light blue onto my palette and got to work rubbing, sloppily dry brushing these colors onto my guy. Chaos Marines have a lot of detail, and these details take dry brushing really well. And using these colors as opposed to white paint will help keep my guy nice and saturated with color. Now for what color to do, I want to try a classic Chaos Space Marine, Black Legion. For the black armor, I took a blue-black speed paint and put this over his armor. I did one layer over everything and then a second layer more targeted to darken the lower half of him. I'm liking how this is looking and I want to introduce a little bit of texture. I took my slap chop colors and sponged these onto my Marine, making him even more chaotic. I went back in with more black-blue paint, focusing on the edges, letting the paint flow into the cracks to blackline everything. Now that's a black power armor with a lot going on. Time for the trim. I learned my lesson the first time. I don't want to put down 100 coats of Balthazar gold. Instead, I'm going to start with green. I mixed this with my warm white and sloppily applied it to all the trim I could reach. This color is about the same hue as the black armor, so if I miss any spots, it'll just look like the armor is in shadow instead of a mistake. Then I started highlighting, using my warm white to sketch on some reflections. I decided any spot that's easy to reach with a brush gets a nice bright reflection. Now, for some color. I took a yellow speed paint and glazed this on. Speed paints are wet and watery, so they soak into the bristles and flow really nicely. I knocked out all this trim with one brush load of paint, nice and quick. Then I took a green speed paint and covered the shadow areas, tinting them back to green. Speed paints are transparent, so this color tints all the previous layers I put down. Putting on the speed paint layers taught me a lot about where my shadows and reflections should be, so I went back in with my highlight colors and did some sketching and edge highlights to make the shiniest spots pop. I glazed more yellow speed paint over these to blend them in, and then came back in with just a few little swipes and dots of warm white to make the brightest, shiniest spots. Alright, I'm actually having a lot of fun painting this Chaos Space Marine, and I distinctly remember not having much fun painting my original Chaos Space Marines. And when I hold them up together, holy cow, does the new one have a very different vibe. On my original Chaos Space Marines, I painted them with a lot of airbrushing for all the blues and base coats, and then for that trim, oh, that trim. 2 coats of ochre brown, and then 2 coats of gold, and then a wash, and then reapplying the highlights of gold, and then a targeted wash, and then edge highlights of silver, everywhere, on every guy. And it doesn't look as good as the new guy. And I haven't even touched the airbrush. On the new guy, I painted the trim, but like 75% of it, and then probably another 25% of it just got a little bit of vague green, and then another 25% of it just got pushed and pulled around with a little bit of speed paints, and then just that last little 25% that was really easy to reach with the brush and really easy to see on the model, just a little bit of little pokey dotty highlights. Ooh, I'm really having fun. Another mistake I made with my old Chaos is too many colors. Each color ended up being a bunch of colors, 3 blues, 2 reds, 4 different greens, all to make the models too colorful and too busy. I have a few more things to paint on this guy, and I want to see what I can do with the colors I already have on my palette. For his horns, I made some grays out of the warm white and green, using my speed paints to glaze. I want these horns to feel highlighted, but that they're made out of the exact same colors that are on the rest of the model. Similarly, I used green speed paint to make his ammo box feel like something stolen off a guardsman who doesn't need it anymore, doing some shading with the black-blue speed paint and then some scratches of warm white. I highlighted his bolter with an invented gray color, and for his knife, I used the light blue I sponged all over him to do some edge highlights and non-metallic metal reflections. Now he's all done and looking super dapper, the limited palette makes him feel very readable, and I think a new color will really pop. Speaking of color, what's Chaos without a little red? I put red onto his eyes, glazing them around the lenses to make them look like they're glowing, and I also put this onto all the other little faces hidden on the mini, like his backpack skulls, Eye of Horus, and you know what? Let's make his bolter glow. The power of the warp is making his bolt shells magically delicious. My first round of red was red mixed with black, and I kept highlighting these parts all the way up to pure red. Because he's so dark, I don't need to push the red any brighter. Using oranges and whites, pure saturated red is all I needed. I'm loving my marine, and my palette is looking really sparse. This is a paint scheme I could actually do to an army. I think forcing myself to work from this limited palette really helped that red accent color glow especially brightly. And you might have noticed that I have not worked on that Space Marine helmet or that part number 69 shoulder pad. And that is because I want to show the difference between a factory fresh Loyalist Space Marine paint job and a chaotic 10,000 years in the warp paint job on the same mini. My Chaos Marine is looking dark and shiny. I want these new bits the opposite. I base coated the shoulder and helmet with a gray paint and then used some contrast paint Imperial Fist to, you guessed it, turn these into stolen Imperial Fist parts. That's how Chaos Space Marines get new gear. They steal them. I found an Imperial Fist transfer off of the Space Marine transfer sheet and crushed it flat using a makeup wedge. A little bit of gloss paint hides any crimes, and I finished up making these parts perfect with a black trim and a little edge highlighting. I used some Reichland Flesh Shade to darken the yellow parts and did some highlights with yellow paint to make the helmet shine. Then I sponged on black paint for paint chips. The Chaos Marines might need a new shoulder, but he can't help but vandalize the filthy Loyalist symbols. I took my hobby drill and drilled some holes right through my paint job and inserted some sewing straight pins I cut down to act as nails. I used brush on primer to get some paint on these new parts, and then I used whatever dark colors I had on my palette to shade and highlight them. And you know what else is on my palette? That's right, our website. EonsOfBattle.com is the place to find our merch like the new Nick and Jay dice and the best way to support us doing what we do with a membership. Each month, members will get a credit that they can use on our new monthly terrain pack or any previous pack we have ever made. For the month of December, we have made The Fall, Part 1, Buildings. The easiest way to get tons of big terrain really fast. This set focuses on small printable decorations for cardboard, foam core, or Pringles can buildings. Build out a grimdark militarized fort dripping with details, with a selection of sandbag-laden battlements, barbed wire defenses, armored wall decorations, and noble eagle lookout posts. This set allows for large terrain to be built in record time, and it has printable textures to add detail and decoration to take the terrain to the next level. This is the first of 3 releases that focus on getting a proper 40K board up and running and as easily as possible. My Chaos Marine is now standing proud, it's time to tackle the base. Thinking again about the awesome Chaos Space Marine Codex cover, I threw a bright saturated red over the base and then mixed in some black paint to darken it. Then I dry brushed this over the cork, leaving it bright and red under his feet, getting darker and darker the further away from the Marine you get. I painted the rim of the base black, and now to add a little more nastiness, I threw on some blood for the blood god. Dripping a paintbrush into the fake blood and then using a toothpick to pull back the bristles and let them spring onto the mini, spraying him in blood. Ooh, this is kind of dangerous territory. I really like this Chaos Space Marine. Could I collect a Chaos army? I mean, I have Death Guard, but Death Guard is its own thing. Chaos Space Marines are pretty cool. And I hear some of you ask, why would anyone want to be a Chaos Space Marine? And to anybody who asked that question, they are forgetting just how miserable and awful the Imperium of mankind is. Why would anyone not want to be a Chaos Space Marine? Why would you want to be a boring old Space Marine slavishly devoted to the Codex Astartes and endlessly fighting orcs and Tyranids and Chaos when you could just do whatever you want forever and let Chaos solve all your problems? Because in Warhammer 40,000, Chaos can actually solve all your problems. In the Imperium of Man, if you want to travel faster than light, it takes the sacrifice of 1,000 unlucky psychers every single day so that you can sort of navigate the warp, but you got a 1 in 10 chance of being attacked by demons. If you're a Chaos Space Marine player and you've properly bribed your sorcerer, you might arrive to your destination 100 years before you've left. Space Marines fantasize about being interred in dreadnought armor. Chaos Space Marines can move into their twilight years as a 2-story tall demon prince with wings. If you give up on your ideas of normalcy, Chaos starts to look pretty darn interesting. I mean, you might end up with a horn growing out of your ear, but you got 2 of them. You weren't using that ear anyway. Chaos Space Marines are pretty darn interesting and very fun to paint, and I got 9 more guys in that Chaos Space Marine box. So let me know in the comments below, what chapter or legion, warband of Chaos Space Marine should I paint next? And a big thanks to Cobalt Keep for sponsoring this video.